Yes, hi. In this video, I'm gonna briefly or rather quickly go over the cutting options in SelfCAD. So I'll start with just from left to right, and I'll start the idea with profile cutting, how to use a profile. So first of all, I'm gonna do a freehand drawing just to show that this cuts automatically, creates a Boolean operation. So if you create something like this, for example, it'll create a hole, or you can draw, let's say, even something solid, and then you use the erase option, and then you can erase. So let's say, for example, you do here and you erase, and that will basically finalize it and create something like this. That's actually not a part of cutting, but just wanted to show the difference as opposed to 3D sketch. If you do 3D sketch, you would kind of do the cutting a different way. So let's say, for example, if I would draw something like this, or let's say just snap here to the center, draw something like this, and now you want to cut away pieces. You have two ways of cutting. You can have the face selection mode. In that case, it will select minimum polygon cycles, kind of like this, and you can just click to delete whatever you want to cut away. Let's say, just delete that. Or you can do the edge selection mode, and in that case, it will select just edges instead of polygons. So you can select, let's say, just this part and just this part, not really polygons, and start cutting. You see, just pieces from the circular shape and so on, and start deleting them. So that's basically one way of cutting profiles. That's kind of trimming, basically. Okay, when it comes to cutting objects, I'll take an object, let's say just the very basic, which is obviously a Boolean operation. And let's say you want to cut away a circular piece in it, something like this. So obviously you can do the stitch and scoop, and in stitch and scoop you have different options, which is the difference would be cutting away. But in that case, that will kind of leave this hole inside because it cuts a volume from another volume. If the object will not have a volume, so let's say, for example, suppose I'm going to delete a face from here, and in that case, I mean, I can add thickness to it, so it will have a volume if I add a volume to it, but for now there's no volume in it. And in that case, in some cases it may have some issues. That's a different thing, how you have fill polygons to fill volumes. So let's say if I do fill polygon will work only once. If I select just one object, you can do fill polygon, and this will basically fill it, close it, or you can add thickness, one of these issues. And if you have other issues with the magic fix, but that's a side note. But for now, let's say this, and I do stitch and scoop, the same thing to remove it, and I'm removing this from this, and you see it basically created a hole over here instead of filling it, because there's no volume, so it will behave differently. This is volume based. But that's basically the general idea. Okay, so now let's see, how can I cut something that has a volume and just cut pieces? So let's just get, actually, let me just fill this. I'll go fill polygons and close this back. And okay, so you have something like this. Now, suppose I want to cut just I'm going to remove actually this object for now. You want to cut just piece of this object, or rather it would be easier, I guess, to show it on this object. And I want to cut part of this object. So we have something we call cube selection. So I'll go over here when we have the selection tools, and we have here this called cube selection. In cube selection, you can select parts. Let's say if I want to cut out pieces like this, and let's say whatever, just randomly, let's say this, you can put in exact measurements what you want to cut. This could be used as a selection, just to select whatever faces is included, not exact, or exact selection. In that case, it will cut. And now if you create something like this, this is cut out. So if I would go now, let's say, for example, extrusion, let's say individual, and you can see I can start extruding these faces. This basically cut out, these pieces were basically cut out, and connect neighbors, whatever, not to go into these details. But basically, cube selection is we call it plane cutting. It's something that cuts by plane, and it's just cutting everything. If you want to cut it at an angle at this particular tool, you will need to rotate the object. If I'm rotating this object, for example, let's say whatever, something, make, let's say something like this, and now if you do cube selection, you'll be able to cut, let's say, at an angle. So you can cut something like this, and let's say if I'm going to delete this, you can see we cut something like this. And obviously I can use fill polygon and fill it in and so on. So that's another way of cutting, which is plane cutting. Then we have the fill polygons. Fill polygons is probably our, not fill polygon, I'm sorry, cut with profile. Cut with profile is one of the weakest tools that we have, in a sense that it doesn't work always. So first I'll show you how to use, and then I'll show when it may have some issues. So if I'm going to draw now 3D sketch again, I can draw, let's say, a rectangle on this, and if it's a plane, I can draw on anything instead of you plane, choose different planes from here. But I can also draw on objects. If I draw on objects, let's say if I can draw on this is not a plane, but I can still try and draw something like this, let's say, and then do something like this, let's say, snap it to here. And now you see I have drawn, let's exit this. Now you've seen I've drawn a profile which is bended and it's on top of this object. Okay, so now what I do is I need to select cut with profile will only work when you select one profile and one object. So if I take this profile and this object, and now I'm going to go to cut with profile, you see this is available. Only this option is available when you select this combination. And I go cut with profile. This will cut this in. Okay, so now you can see where in these particular cases where you have very close faces and things, it may sometimes create holes. So the cut is actually done. If you look at the, let's see if it is actually done. Yes, you can see over here, it did cut them. So this is done. You can even select, if you go polygon selection, yeah, this wouldn't help, and I'll show you in a second. But you can see it created holes, and this gets created when they intersect, snapping, like this vertex snapped with this one and this with this one. So in this case, it's not perfect. In this examples, we're thinking to add other options, different algorithms for cut with profile, because it turns out that no option is good for all. Some are better to use plane cutting. In this example, plane cutting would be better. In some examples, it would be better to use the technique we use now. So I want to show you an example where it is actually usable, where this would be very helpful. So I'm going to go back to my 3D sketch. And in this case, actually, just to show you something, I don't actually need to go to plane cutting. I have a tool over here to focus. So I'm focusing the camera on this. And now if I go back to my drawing, let's say if I draw, let's say, a circle, I switch back to plane. I don't need to draw on an object because this is a plane basically, and the camera is focused. So I don't need to choose object option. I can use plane option. And I'm going to draw, let's say, a circle here, let's say a circle here, and a circle here. Okay. And this needs to be a closed shape. It doesn't have to be, it could be anything. If you leave just something open, it will ignore it. It must be a closed shape. So if you have a closed shape, let's say something like this. Okay. So now we're going to choose cut with profile. In this particular case, I'm expecting it should work, and actually it did work. You see it cut it beautifully. This particular shape was not closed, although I thought I drew it closed. It looks like I didn't, and I think this didn't cut. So you have an option over here to select them. You see polygon will select everything, so I can go to part selection. Part selection will allow me to select just parts. And you can see this has not been cut, this part, because it wasn't closed, and now this cut. So let me show you just something. If I'll do, let's say, undo this, I'll undo the cut, and let me just snap this. I'll go to this part and let deselect the object. So allow me to select this vertex over here. Let's zoom into it, and let's select again this. Oops, what did I do over here? Vertex selection. Okay, let me select this. I have an extra vertex here, it looks like, and I'm going to go to my snap tool. And I'm going to snap it to this vertex over here. Let's see. Okay, over here. So it's snapped to this one. Okay, so now if I have a closed shape, I may need to remove this extra vertex over here that's created, but let's see, it may work without it even. So let's go now and cut with profile. And now it looks like this has been cut as well. So if I go now to my polygon selection, I have to turn on the polygon selection first. This is a dynamic tool, depends what you have. So I turn on polygon selection and I go part selection, and now you can see I can select this, this, and this, and this. So these are basically what this type of selection is made for. And go, let's say, and extrusion, sorry, what am I doing? At extrusion, let's say, you can see this cut perfectly fine. So this is how it works. When you have these complex tools, shapes like I do a cylinder or sphere, I think one example was, it's not working perfect. So again, this is an algorithm we use. We tried actually many ways, and nothing will work on every example. If you use box cutting on this, plane cutting, in this example, the geometry would get too complex, which is not what you expect. So our final solution probably would give a few options, then it will work better on all shapes. But for now, it's a very powerful tool for when it works. But it's probably the only tool that we have that I would say it doesn't work always, and yeah, be aware it's a tool that's available for professionals who know when to use it and hopefully wouldn't get upset when it's not working. So that's it, the general overview of the cutting tools. I hope this was helpful, and let me know if you have any other question. Thank you.